Wholeness means to me being in a state of joy.
Wholeness means feeling complete, owning my authentic gifts.
Wholeness is really connected. Everything is connected to everything.
Wholeness is where we have access to all parts of ourselves.
Here are the cards for today. This deck. This is a deck called Dimensions of Light.
Ooh.
Yeah. And
Where did you get that one?
I got this at that Synchronicities where the selenite cave is. And it's funny because I came home and the first card I picked was like really a downer. And I was like, what? And I kind of put it in the drawer for a little bit because I'm like, I'm confused. But anyway, so this is today's card. This is what it looks like.
Oh, it's blurry. How can we make it? Why is it doing that?
I don't know. Let's see. I mean, it is kind of blurry.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Okay. I was like, it's blurry, but that's what it is. It doesn't have any words on it or anything.
There's no words. Yeah, it's just words.
Okay.
And then the back just has a number.
Oh, yeah. So it's just blurry. Okay.
Yep. It's almost like the picture, like different pictures of light. They're all just a version of light. So today's message that goes along with this card is there is an infinite, continuously available source of luminous grace connected to your heart. That light has the capacity to provide all manner of assistance. To not call upon it would be akin to going hungry when a feast is being offered. There is no such thing as asking too much from the spiritual realms. The beings of unconditional love that seek to assist humanity cannot do so unless invited. That is the nature of free will. It is the nature of spiritual beings to shine graciously and provide blessings. To invoke their assistance allows for a mutual fulfillment of sacred purpose. For the light to support you, you must first invite it in. The light can bring so much into your world that benefits you and others. Switch scarcity thinking for the joy of prosperity consciousness and watch the goodness of grace come. And I think that's like, it's like that a breath. We talked about it before, the breath. We don't think we're going to run out of breath. We don't sit there and hold it and make sure and conserve it. We just allow it to be. And I think that's the same thing. But with along with that, we're going to breathe in oxygen and we breathe out carbon dioxide, which feeds the earth, right? Feeds the greens, it's actually helpful. It's actually beautiful to, for that exhale. Even to us, it would like not feel good. Do you know what I mean? To us, it would be like, oh, we could die if we breathe in, the things that we don't want. So think about it that way, as far as like, when we ask for help from the spiritual realm, we wouldn't want to do all that stuff, but it is their joy. You know what I mean? Like it is their joy.
And it seems like it benefits all. Like you think you're just being so selfish, but no, really, it's benefiting everybody.
It is. It's just like, the trees don't grow without our exhale. You know what I mean? Like the plants don't grow. It's like it needs it all, so your desiring is important, which, is really interesting to talk about, because today, I think we're going to just talk about and kind of work through this idea of that spiritual body, which is our focus this month long, right?
Yes.
Spiritual body.
Yes.
And it brings up a lot of things for people. So I think we had something else planned. And I think at the last minute, we kind of changed it. And I think it's so wise that, you were kind of like hinting at that. And this morning I finally went, oh, she's getting she's getting a download. She's not asking, she's receiving, right? She's receiving information about what we need to do. And so I think that was a good way to start, right? Like,
I guess I'll tell you what tell our listeners what I was thinking about. I was like, I understand the physical body. I've got one. I can see it. I can touch it. I know how to make it work. I've been doing it since birth, right?
Yeah.
And the mental body, we go to school, we're taught how to read and write and talk and all of those things. So I understand how to learn and absorb knowledge. I would say emotions are kind of also come with me at birth. Like we talk about them, we have names for them.
You can't
But the
help
spiritual
it.
body, is a little bit of an enigma because I don't see it. I mean, there's
Right.
people that can, I would
Hmm.
say, but
Hmm.
I can't touch it. I don't understand it. And I would say for me,
Hmm.
religion was a way to focus on that spiritual body. It was like a
Right.
box I could put it in. I could understand it, had walls.
Hmm.
But then when you start to think maybe this isn't all there is,
Hmm.
when you step out of that box,
Hmm.
then I don't know. I don't really understand it. I don't have a framework anymore.
Right. When you start to see beautiful people in the world that don't belong to the same religion that you do, it impacts you. Or when things come up or you get hurt. We'll talk about that later. You get hurt. There's
Yeah.
a thing called spiritual trauma we're going to talk about. It's a real thing.
Yeah.
And and so those things taint this idea of spirituality or the spiritual part of ourselves. And so I think this is important to stop and discuss the difference. So I think it was perfect that you brought up those other bodies because that's the way we can use, we can be relative to the spiritual body. So
Okay.
when you first talked about the physical body, and so a while ago, I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple of years ago, several years ago, I did like a free, no, it wasn't free. It was a in-person class. An in-person class. It was like my first I ever did. I think we were selling tickets. I sold 2 tickets and begged a bunch of other people to come. Like it was one of those moments where it was painful. It was a hard time. It was my very first thing I really ever sold tickets to, and so anyway, but I called it a U print because I'm like, there's a blueprint for your life, which seems to be kind of like, we're given a blueprint almost about here's how your life's supposed to be. And I thought we need to go into ourselves and figure out our own print. What is our U print? Not a blueprint,
Hmm.
but a U print. And so that was kind of the idea of the class. And we went through all these different areas of our lives. There's 8 different areas that we experience. One, just simply a family life, our family life, our work life, our love life, our family life, and what do those, we kind of break those down, but we're always referencing through our experience of those things, or always referenced through the 4 bodies: mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual. Our
Okay.
family life, the way we think about our family and the way we think about our work are totally different, but
Hmm.
that's how we experience with them. So as I was preparing for that, I kind of came across this idea. When I did my shamanic training a few years back, I learned about something called a medicine wheel. And it's very symbolic, and it's one of those things where it's a shape. And here's what it looks like. So when we look at this wheel, first of all, I just thought it was so amazing. The word medicine wheel, it's a native term which comes from the healing art, and the wheel, which means eternal. So it's like the eternal healing art is what the representation of this is. And you can change this up. A medicine wheel is really about, you can put different things in different places. Usually it is about north, south, east, west, the directions. But I chose to use it in connection with these 4 bodies because they just spoke to me. And so if we think about it, when I was putting this together, first of all, you have the spiritual body, and then what's going to be the opposite of the spiritual body? The physical body. So it's not that they're opposite, they're on the same spectrum, right? Because we move. So if you think about moving in a spectrum between the physical world and the spiritual world, there really is. Sometimes we're more in the physical, sometimes we're more in the spiritual, but they sit on the same plane. But they're also, because it's a spectrum, you've got one on one end and one on the other. So the spiritual body is going to have, well, let's talk about the physical body first because we can identify with that. So let's think about the physical body.
Okay.
It's temporary, right? The physical body doesn't stay the same. It's changing, it's growing or shrinking, or it's always moving, right? It is always changing.
Yeah.
Even like the cells of the body, there's new cells, we regenerate, it's changing, it's switching, it's
And we're always
growing.
digesting and
Right. It's always in
eliminating and
movement.
stuff. Yeah.
Yes. Um, it's seen and touchable. So sometimes part of the physical body to me includes some of the physical things around us, you know. So the physical body is what sees the trees, you know, so that's physical. That's part of that physical world, is these physical, tangible, seen things.
Okay.
The physical body has form, which means it has, these things have edges, right? If I'm myself ends at a certain point and begins at another point, you know, and something else begins,
Okay.
or it has edges. The physical body is always gathering information. You know, it's gathering, it's learning, it's growing,
The five
it's
senses, right?
feeling. Yeah, right. It's bringing in information. And it's personal. Like my physical body is distinctly mine, right? So if we
Mhm.
contrast those things, then we can understand the spiritual body. So when the physical body is temporary, the spiritual body is eternal. It
Okay.
is eternal, it is infinite. It is the part of you that always exists and always will exist. It's very formless. And that's kind of what's difficult about what you were saying, is because it's so formless, how do you, you know, it has no end. There's no finite thing to define, right? It's endless. It's knowing, it's where the physical body is you know, finite and ending, the and itself and personal. The spiritual body is connecting to all people. It's always connected to everything. You know, it's part of the oneness, right? It exists everywhere. And it also, the spiritual body, so we take in information from the physical body, and then the spiritual body gives it some meaning, you know, it gives it some meaning. And
Okay.
it relates to, you know, it's so symbols, rituals, those kind of things really speak to that spiritual body because they are formless and nameless. It's not just a ritual is meant to move physically, but have it represent millions of things. So it's like really coming together with those physical and spiritual bodies, because we're actually doing something. Somebody can like I've heard, make a cup of tea, and that can be a spiritual practice because we're doing it
Hmm.
with intention. We're really in the moment, right? That can be a spiritual practice for some people, because it can be a ritual for some people because the meaning is personal and different, but we're doing a physical thing, right? So it's really bringing those together. It's also invoking, you know, emotions, and it's also bringing in thoughts that are enlightening and stuff. So that's why rituals are so important, but it doesn't work unless it's not about the ritual, you know what I mean? It's got to have all the other parts, you know,
Okay.
included, right? So then if you look at this wheel again, it was just interesting as I looked at some of the other things and just realized where they came from. You know, for instance, the element of the spiritual is fire or light, let's say. The expression is light, versus the physical, whose the element is earth, right? Earth,
Hmm.
and expression is creation. You know, that's how it expresses itself. The purpose of the spiritual body is to reflect. And I think that says two things, you know, which goes along with the light. Number one, reflection as far as, you know, thinking about things and wondering about things and
Oh.
expanding things. I think, and also it's reflecting as far as like, you know, when I'm really tuned into my spiritual body and I'm talking to you, I reflect your spiritual body. You know what I mean? Like we come into an alignment, or we get attuned to each other in those situations. And
Wow.
it's really powerful, right? It's really powerful. And I think this is another thing, you know, what's interesting. So if the spiritual body is to reflect, then the physical body is to absorb. And we talked about that as far as gathering information. You can look at it that way.
If you were to look at it from like a digesting elimination side, from
Mhm.
physical, what would the opposite be in the spiritual? Would it just be
So the
absorbing rather than just
Mhm.
working through? I don't know.
So that's a that's a fascinating thing to think about, you know, and one of the answers that I can think of that just comes right away is like, this is the thing, is they're always working together. So where the body's digesting, you could say the spiritual body's taking in the nutrients, right?
Okay.
So the physical body is moving the thing, it's doing the physical stuff. It's going through the motions, where the spiritual body is about, would be, in metaphoric terms, like absorbing, taking in, or like, it knows what's the important things, and it's taking them in and making them part of who I am. Do you know what I mean? Finding meaning in that food, right? Finding the meaning in that food, for lack of a better word, and using it for our best good, right?
Well, even
Um,
like you think of a symbol, right? We have symbols all over, and the
right.
symbol is a physical form, but what it means to me could be different from you, and our spirits
Exactly.
are interpreting that or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And we have to, and that's the thing, when we're given the answer to the symbols, we miss out. I think it's kind of like that card. It's like being hungry and refusing not to eat the feast presenting to us, it's like,
Hmm.
or it's like, giving us, bread and water, mush every day. It's like, yeah, you can live off of that. You really, really can. And you won't starve. But boy, the depth, the layers of, when, these little mamas from these, from these countries that are, thousands of years old, the little Mexican mamas, little Indian mamas in their kitchen putting layers of flavor. And, that was interesting. When I ate Indian food for the first time, I had no idea I was eating a tomato-based sauce. It did not taste like spaghetti to me. You know what I mean? Like, not at
Yeah.
all. But it's because we have these layers, these other ingredients that just transform it. And it's funny because as I've learned cooking, specifically those Mexican and Indian are, you've got an enchilada sauce that is very similar to the curries, the kormas, or the marsala, those kind of things. They've got the same ingredients almost identically, but adding one little bit different here and one little bit different here. And they both have their bread, you got the naan and you got the tortilla.
Yeah.
Um, it's fascinating that just a small difference makes such a big difference, but that's the thing,
Right.
that our recipe for our spiritual self is going to be individual and unique. And that's how it becomes this really complex flavor. That's how we add something to the entire world, is by understanding and really fine tuning and growing this spiritual body. And it's been, religion has been an easy way to, to um, offload that and let those happen for us. And some people, they can go their whole life, and that's great. They can go their whole life, and that is all that they need, is that the symbols, here's the symbol and here's what it means. Um,
So eh, going back to the cooking thing, you can look at, you've got this recipe.
yeah.
You do this, you do this, you do this, you do this, and then you get this. But then you
Hmm.
have the complexity of like, well, I don't like cumin, so I'm going to do
Right.
coriander, and you're going to add in
Right.
these different things and you make it your own.
Right.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I really like
Yeah.
thinking about that.
Yeah. And the depth of flavor. Like, I can't, if you haven't gone and had Indian food lately, I mean, that's just one, or a really good mole, I mean, the flavors, if you go through the ingredients, you would be like, what? I have a really good, maybe I'll add it in the show notes, a really good, it's like a instant pot chicken korma. It's so
Okay.
easy. And I'm so proud of myself every time I make it, because it's like, it's good. But it is
Yeah.
the ingredients, I was like, what? I would never know. It's got cilantro in it, it's got tomatoes, and it's got seasoning.
Yogurt, probably.
So I think
Does
this
it have
one does,
yogurt?
it uses coconut milk, actually. Some like
Oh, okay.
coconut milk. But super easy. You just literally throw the stuff in. And then once you use I use like a immersion blender, and you would never, it's just like this orangey, creamy, thick sauce that goes over rice with chicken, and it's delightful. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just late to the table, but I mean, we've been eating Indian food for a long time, and my husband's been there, and we've had friends from India. But I just imagine, because it is the little mamas taking out what they don't like, taking out the cumin and putting in the coriander, that has
Did you
changed and
watch?
evolved it over time, over thousands of years.
Yeah. Did you watch 100 Foot Journey
I
when they?
did. I did.
I loved it when like the mom would take the little baby and she would have him like pull out the spices and smell them, and
Mm.
it was that whole immersive experience. Like it
Yeah.
reminds me of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that like, doesn't that just like invoke like joy, like to think about that process? And so we should have that with this recipe for our own spirituality or our own way of finding meaning in things. And people can use whatever religion they've grown up with and look at it and make it their own too. You know what I mean? Like if that serves people, that's fine. And we'll talk about that a little bit as far as when we move into kind of some spiritual trauma. That's not always the case. You know, that's not always the case for people. So we want to just honor those people that are on that journey. But in this class too, so we have these different lives, right? And so we have this spiritual body, but we have this, what I called in my class, a divine life. They're kind of two different things. So I have this spiritual body that's going to interact and be part of who I am in all areas of my life. But there is this there's this part of me, and I spent a while trying to decide what that was. And when I gave the class, I think I just called it my inner life, but I since split it into, I have an inner life, and then I have what I call now our divine life. It's this part of ourselves. And it's because it's heavily associated with the spiritual world. It's tricky because it's hard to put parameters around, right? It's hard to define. But in the workbook I created, the first question I ask is, how would I define my divine life? How would I define my divine life? Because I think that's where you have to start. What does that mean to me? And a lot of people first of all, there's going to be some people that triggers, that's a triggering statement, just to be honest. And two, there's going to be other people that just go, I don't blank, and then there's going to be other people that are they're going to write down their spiritual practice or their religion, right? That's what I am, but at least I wanted to give you an opportunity to think about that for yourself, think about that for yourself. And then we move into things, each of these areas of our life, I ask 3 questions. What does my divine life or all these other lives look like surviving to me? What is it just surviving? What is it when it's successful? And what is it when it's significant? And we go through in the class, I went through and we really talked about those 3 things. But so when I'm just getting by, at the bottom rail of survival, what does it look like? I got to think about that for myself. What does that look like for me? What does it look like when it's successful? What do I want it to be? And, successful can just be non-triggered for some people, right? And then significant. What if this divine part of me actually impacts the world and becomes significant? What does that look like? What can I imagine that to be? And then we look at how it is currently. What do I feel like I'm at? Where am I surviving? Am I successful? Am I significant?
So can we break that down a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
So if you were to think about your divine life, like, okay, you said for some people it could be a religious practice, right? Or like worship, maybe?
Yeah.
How would you define that outside of a religious parameter? Like,
So let me take a couple of quotes I have on here. Our lives have various and unique places in the harmony of the divine life. That's by Josiah Royce. This part of us, this divine part, and we're going to go into, a little bit of a belief system because this is a belief for me. It might not be a belief for the other person, but I believe that from the very moment you existed, you are divine. You are divine, meaning you have the capacity within you that encompasses all that the universe has to offer, all that the idea of God has to offer, lives inside of you, is part of your being. It's never earned. There's never a point where we gain it. It is just true. It is just true that you are a divine being, that you have greatness within you, that you deserve love and are worthy of love, caring, compassion. I personally, I believe anytime we do something that someone would justify, as a sin, let's say, we'll use that word, that, that's like this bottom of the rail kind of definition for it. It means what's really going on is there's something going on, a belief, a hurt, a pain. It's a reaching for healing, for healing. In fact, in a book I read a while ago, it was actually called The Christ Who Heals. And they talked about how in the translation of the Bible from years, I mean, if I was thinking about that, do we understand the process that the Bible itself has had to go through? I mean, people lived in their own little world, so they spoke their own language. So to translate it, somebody would have to move to another place, learn the other language. I mean, I don't even know how it survived, right? Like, it's crazy. But because of that, so that's the miracle of it. But there's also always the physical side to that spiritual growth and meaning. And the physical side is that humans did it, right? So the translation is very much, it's because we're trying to describe these amazing things in there. They're trying to, and yet we're putting vocabulary words to them, which is a very physical form, like it's got edges, but the stuff that the truths are not, right? They don't. Spiritual stuff does not. And we're trying to put them in this form, and then we're going to promise that that form is correct. But there's no way because it's spiritual things, right? So we get caught up in the vocabulary word and lose the meaning. And, we get stuck fighting over the word, is it God? Is it Allah? We're going to fight over that word versus what that word represents, which I think is the meaning of it. And so,
and like you said, it could be also individual depending on what
exactly
that means to you, right?
It's going to be both. And that's the thing. That's why it's a spectrum. We always will have some physical parts to our spiritual self. We're always going to have spiritual parts to our physical self. There's, it's just, it rides on that spectrum. They're never disconnected. They're never disconnected. So we're always going to, at this realm, maybe not everywhere, but in this realm, we're going to have that physical part. And that physical part is temporary and it changes. And
it's like it's like spiritual chutes and ladders or something, right?
Yes.
Like we're just always sliding.
That's a great idea. Yeah. And so I think if we embrace that versus try and resist it, in my opinion, that's where it gets great, right? That's where it gets great. Because we're resisting, we want to push away the physical in order to have the spiritual overtake. And I'm saying, no, I'm saying embrace it. At your best. You can't, they're on the same spectrum. You can't.
Yeah.
So back to this, just the word. So back to the translation. So the translation in that they talked about from, I believe it was Hebrew, maybe it was Greek, that there was a word that they translated in different English words, but in some places they translated it to savior. And in some places, they had translated the same exact word to healer. And I think we kind of put this emphasis on savior, which, I'm not against, but like, what a difference the word healer is. He came to heal the world versus he came to save the world. There's just, to me, in my meaning, that feels very different.
To me, it feels like healing is a partnership and savior is very much a
one up, one down. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Right. And if you think about that spiritual part of who we are, that's endless and connected to everything, there is no hierarchy in the spiritual realm. There is, it's like there, because there's no end. There's no borders. It's
That's
endless.
so hard for our human minds, our mental side, I think, because we put hierarchies in everything.
Right, we do.
Education, ages, sexes, everything.
Yeah, it feels safe because then I know where I belong. And that's why, when you talked about, I've lived in this I relied on my religious practice to give me my spirituality. And it was so nice because I had these four walls I could lean up against. Here's what was happening. And then we have this growth period. We have this, a lot of people call it, I've heard it called a crisis, a deconstruction. It's most of it is a breaking down. The idea is it's breaking down when really it's really just, yeah, maybe those walls have broken down, but now we see the entire universe. Now we can incorporate all of everything into us, into what I feel is personal to me. You know what I mean? Now I have all the ingredients available and I get to create what I like and enjoy. And
adjust over time.
And adjust,
right?
and adjust over time. You're right, because it's always going to be relative to this physical being of who I am, right? On my deathbed, I might be a totally different spiritual person, right?
Yeah.
Then I might go right back to all those things and sit in my little box, my little walls and be, who knows? It can change. It should change. It should grow because that spiritual part is eternal and infinite. It has all possibilities available to it. It has to. Otherwise, it's finite. Otherwise, it just goes against the whole definition of it. In my opinion, like in my understanding of it, the spiritual is just vast. And so that divine part is the part of you that experiences that the divine part of you is so it was a minute because my divine life, how does that different? My divine life how is that different from my spiritual body? And I think just because the difference is that the spiritual body is always connected to those other bodies, where this divine life is a little different. It's going to be, it's part of how I'm interpreting those things, maybe a little bit. It's where, all of these areas of our life are, they're external experiences. They are physical experiences that we're having almost, versus this, except for the, internal. You'll have to see. I'll have to do that class again and record it. It was pretty just kind of interesting to kind of go into these different areas and feel what they feel like. Each of these, I ask questions. What are some of the things I'm doing to support my divine life? What does that look like? Because I think we're better than we think, especially when it comes to this divine part. We just haven't let ourselves explore. So what am I doing in my divine life that's, well, you know what I'm doing? I'm letting myself breathe when I want to breathe. I'm letting myself have an experience that maybe the old me would have thought this is not okay, and I feel okay with it. Not that we always have to go exploration. Exactly. We do that. And that's the thing. It's going to be different for every person. I can't just give you a list of here's how you support your divine life. The rules, I do give some guidance, but what are some things I wish I would improve? And what are some things I can do? What are some things that feel easy to me to support myself in this life? What do I not want as part of my divine life? And for some people, that's maybe that my divine life, I can't have this, as part of my divine life. And that's fair, and that's why this little workbook is your own personal experience, like nobody has to see it, but you can say that here where maybe you aren't allowed to say it everywhere else, right? What are some things I have overcome, in this divine life? Think about, these are just questions that can go on and on, right? They're not meant to be a finite answer, necessarily. So here's another quote by Neil Donald Walsh. There is a divine purpose behind everything, and therefore a divine presence in everything. And I think that's the thing, is every experience can, no matter what, is able to grow us and help us learn. And that does not mean that in the middle of a difficult time, it's enjoyable or fun at all. But it does have potential to grow us. And so there is this, it's like a little sprinkling of magic in every part of our lives that we can grow and learn from it. And that's just that's divine to me. That's
I
divine.
remember someone telling me, when you're going through a difficult time, sorry, that you say, thank you for this opportunity to grow.
Mhm.
And it sounds like kind of pedantic, but
Right.
also there's a little bit of freedom in that of like,
Mhm.
wow, this isn't just a curse.
Yeah,
This is
yeah,
my
yeah.
opportunity to become more of myself.
Right. Right. And I mean, and what's difficult even about that though is to prescribe that, because when we're hurting, we have to just we can't, it's really easy to tell ourselves we're not supposed to hurt, you know, like
Yeah.
we're not supposed to hurt. So we have to, we do both. Like that's the thing. Yes, we pull ourselves up and we comfort ourselves and we build ourselves up, but we don't do it in the way of pushing down the feelings that we're having, the experience that we're
Mm.
having. It's a fine line, and it's so different for different people, right? It's different for different people. So, but that brings us to this idea of spiritual trauma. And it's something we kind of need to talk about because nobody talks about it. It's really uncomfortable for people to talk about spiritual trauma.
Because it
But
feels
let's
like you're blaming someone or something or a system. And it's not
right,
really that.
right.
It's
No, in
all
fact,
your internal, right? It's your
exactly.
internal
Ex-
reactions to things.
exactly. In fact, that's the definition of trauma. It's what happens inside you. That's the trauma. It happens inside you. So I have this like little experiment I kind of want to do. I haven't done it yet, but I kind of want to do it because I want people to understand that the way that trauma works. Because a lot of times when you're trying to describe, when you're trying to put words around trauma, if other people did not have that reaction, they most likely come out with a well, just do this, or
Mm-hmm.
um
Want to fix it.
yeah, they're like, yeah, they just want to fix it when it's not the external experience that's the problem, So I want to line some people up on a stage. I imagine this, and I want to say, okay, we're going to do just a relaxation technique. I just want you to relax. I don't want you to worry. This is a relaxation technique. And then what I want to do is I want to take a balloon and I want to pop it right by their face. And when they jump, I want to say, no, 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 no. You remember? This is a calming, this is a calming exercise
Oh, gosh.
because that's what trauma is. It happens on its own. It's a reflex. There is no mental, like the person sitting there doesn't say, I'm scared of balloons, or they don't have this like thought process of like, I don't like balloons. That was a loud noise. I don't like loud noises. Like their body, they will probably jump, right?
Mm-hmm.
They will probably jump. And then if I take that same person, I say, okay, we're going to do it again. And I pull up another balloon. Like, what are they going to do? Are they going to be relaxed and calm?
No.
No, they're going to be like, I don't care who you are, you're going to tense up a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
right? That is the idea of trauma. It comes up in our bodies. It lives in the body. It happens
It's completely
inside.
natural.
Completely
Like,
natural.
yeah.
Completely natural. In fact, but here's the thing, we're supposed to have stress in our lives. Stress is like when we can't build a muscle if we don't tear it down. Like we are supposed to have stress in our life. And I'm going to put in the show notes a link to this podcast, because I think it's really important for some people that are struggling with this, specifically if they have some spiritual trauma or know someone that has some spiritual trauma. It's a podcast by Hillary McBride, and it's called Holy Hurt. And it's a beautiful podcast. She has the most kind, loving heart. She always is mindful of what might be coming up for people, and accepting of it. I just love her. She is just amazing. But she talks about in that podcast the idea at the beginning about what we do need stress. Stress is a part of our life. But I love the way she said it so much. I'm just going to totally read it because she said, in a perfect world, our stress is good. In a perfect world, we experience a stressor, feel the activation in our bodies. The activation mobilizes us to create change or ask for help or perform at a higher level or signal to others that we need some support. So I'm going to say that again, just because. So usually we feel this activation, and what it does is it mobilizes us to change. If I'm going to go touch something hot, it motivates me to pull back, right? It motivates me to change and move. I'm not going to get burned, right? That stressor. It motivates us. It's supposed to motivate us to ask for help. So it's like, I'm falling, help, help. Like it's an automatic response to ask for help. Or it's to perform at a high level. Like, if I'm under a stress and my baby's getting hurt, we all heard those stories of those grandmas that could lift up that car and take their baby out from underneath the car. Perform at a high level, or signal to others that we need some support. This is what the stressor, the activation, is supposed to do. We use up that activation in these areas. So that activation in our bodies, we use it up, and then we recover, and then we rest. And then if something else happens, it goes through that again, the cycles again. Okay, so this is what stresses are supposed to do. But that's what gets tricky in trauma, because our nervous system has a different response. It doesn't, it can't work. So in these high trauma situations, which I'm going to shift over specifically into spiritual trauma, now that we've defined that spiritual body of us, how do we define the spiritual trauma? It doesn't have an ending. It's very obscure. It's it doesn't, we don't know. We can't describe it to someone else, necessarily, because it's internal. So someone's sitting there on the pews and a music starts singing, and someone has a reaction, and somebody says, it's just a song. And you're like, yeah, it's just a song. But your body has had a reaction, and you didn't change, and you didn't reach out for help, and you weren't able to perform at a higher, so it just lives in the body. It just lives there. And any little thing that has anything to do with that, it's going to come up again, which sitting in the pews at a song, that's a trailhead, as Dr. Richard Schwartz says, to a trauma that actually happened, right? That's a reaction that you're having to something that really, really impacted you. And it's super tricky when it's spiritual trauma, because usually it comes from these places that are supposed to give us answers. They're supposed to be the meaning. They're supposed to be
good.
Right. They're supposed to be good. And as much as we don't want that to be true, that spiritual trauma is happening, it is. It's happening to people in their bodies. They are having a reaction to something that they wish they didn't. They wish they weren't happening, but the activation is happening, and they don't know where to turn. And it can be maddening. It can be maddening to not, because that energy, that activation isn't being dealt with. It's being shunned, it's being shut down. The very things that we need to move through the stressor is used against us, like we should be able to figure it out well, what are you doing wrong? Everything's not going well. Well, what are you doing? Are you doing this, and this? When we're supposed to be asking for help, we're just shut down. Where we're supposed to be able to, perform at a higher rate, our body says no, because it's hurt. That's why it's such a beautiful, beautiful title to her podcast, Holy Hurt, because it's different than others.
So I guess, say you bump up against something like that or hit that trailhead. I know for me, I usually shut down, and then I just either completely avoid that or I just assimilate. Is that usually what people do, or am I unusual in that? Like, what do people usually do when they bump up against it?
Right. So, just to really, really pound in enough a little more, is that when that comes up, just to recognize it is a physical reaction. I mean, you could probably think about it right now. Sometimes you're getting it feels like to me, sometimes it feels like a drip of sweat just goes all down my back, like you're having a physical reaction that is not something that you have tried to do. You know what I mean? You're not trying to invoke it. And you're right. So, and the activation is uncomfortable. Like it's like holding a weight, and then they're like, just hold it for 2 minutes, and then 10 minutes has gone by. You're dying, right? You can't hold that activation for very long. So when we shut it down, when you say I shut it down, yeah, we have to. We have to go numb in our body because we can't do it anymore. We can't hold that activation anymore. So we go numb. And how we go numb is different. So you talked about you appease. Yours is an appease. So we've got fight, flight, freeze, appease, or fawn is the one they say. Those are the responses, the trauma responses. So your body, and I would say your bodies, mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, have decided that appease is how you're gonna get to where you don't feel it anymore. So I'm just gonna join in, and I'm gonna pretend like everything's okay, and and help other people and be supportive so that activation goes somewhere, right? That activation goes somewhere. And maybe in that assimilating, maybe that energy gets dispersed, and then you can live, right? Or it just gets cut off. Like it depends. Like it's probably different each time too for each of us. Other
So is that
people,
healthy? Like if you were in a healthy way, do you
no.
still do those 5 things, or what are you doing in a healthy way?
So this is the most amazing question that you've just asked, because when I sit on that and ponder that, I don't know if we can, once it's there, especially, I don't know if we can do it alone. I don't know if you can do it alone, which because we need to ask for help. We need, both of those. So let me read those again. We need to create change, and we need to perform at a high level, and we need to signal others that we need support, or we need to reach out and ask for support. Two of those things are including other people. And I feel like once we've moved in there, it's like there are some people, I'm sure, that can pull themselves up by the bootstraps. I don't think it's possible. I think we're just saving it for another day. But when someone comes in, when someone witnesses, and maybe we can do it for ourselves, because another thing to understand is that when the wound has happened, when the trauma has happened, it's happened to a part of us. It can never touch that spiritual self. That spiritual self is endless, right? It's endless. It's infinite. It's formless. It's knowing. It's connected. It's meaningful. It cannot be destroyed. Our body will feel like it, because we're on that spectrum, right? We're on that spectrum. So our body might feel like it's been taken out, but it can't. It exists always. It exists always. So, but we need to do the things to let the other bodies, our emotional body, our mental body, and our physical body, to be in alignment with that, because those things might not, we might not feel like we are endless, or eternal or worthy. We might not have those beliefs in our mind, that belief that says, oh, I'm not good enough. We might not have those. So that's the practice. That's the practice, is getting those things in alignment to this truth, which, we talk about it. I reference it so much because it puts words into it. It defines it in a way that a lot of people can understand, is that that true self is calm, it's connected, it's curious, it's creative. It's all these C's. It's all these C words. And when we go into that place, that big S self, that's when, to me, like all the four bodies are in alignment, which when we go back to that wheel, that's that heart, right? In the middle, we want all of those in balance and connected to each other, and all important to each other. The emotional body is not more important than the mental body. The mental body is not more important than the physical body. They're all in alignment with each other, but we very much hierarchy them. In fact, if you look back at that, you can see where the top part if somebody is very mental and spiritual, they're going to be like, that's going to be a visionary type person, right? If they're very
Okay.
spiritual and emotional, they're going to be, that's the epitome of a yin type personality. And what's difficult
Explain
is
that more.
yin is the feminine energy, where
Mm-hmm.
yang is the masculine energy, which is different than male
Okay.
and female. Like we all have yin and yang within us. We all have masculine and feminine qualities. So a
Mm-hmm.
man that's very spiritual and emotional, oh man, they're going to not like that about themselves in this, because we have this
In our
construct in our
culture,
society,
for sure.
in our culture. They're not going to like that. A woman that's very mental, like mental body, their brain is just heightened, and their physical body is, very strong. That's the yang version. They're gonna get struggle in our society. But that emotional spiritual person, or the emotional physical person, is going to be very experiential. They're gonna be the ones that are like to create and notice the like beautiful sky, and they're very experiential. It's very physical,
Okay,
emotional.
something's coming to my mind. So when you were saying that about the female who's maybe more that way, I was thinking about Encanto
Hmm.
and like the different characters in Encanto. Where could we put those? So like Luisa to me would be that young. Do you think
Yeah.
that who's the main character?
Mary Bell.
Maribel.
Maribel.
Is she the heart?
Yeah, she's the heart. She's the heart.
Okay, so then is the
Smart.
sister, yeah,
So,
where's the sister,
so the
the
flower
flower?
girl, I think she would be maybe, well, this is interesting. Let me think about, because we've got the one who has the heightened sense of hearing. Maybe she's
Okay,
experiential, maybe she's emotional, physical, because she
okay,
experiences. And then maybe the spiritual, emotional, the yin would be the sister, the flower sister.
okay. Then what
So
would Bruno be?
visionary.
Okay, visionary. And what about the grandma?
She is the lack of, she is the opposite. She is in that show, she's the villain, right? She is the villain. In fact, it's the first Disney show that the villain isn't killed. Isn't that interesting? I saw
Oh,
something about that. She's not killed, she's transformed.
yeah.
So it's really
Wow.
powerful that she isn't destroyed in some way. She's transformed.
So she's the antithesis to Maribel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
that's a good way of putting it. But yeah, Maribel is the heart. And because she, that's the whole thing. Maribel's her, how would we describe her gift?
It was
Connected.
like all of them.
It was all, yeah, it was like she had connection, which is spiritual body. She was emotional. She could feel what other people were going through. She's very empathic, right?
Yeah.
Physically, like as far as her physical, she was the one cleaning the physical space. She was the only person I saw taking care of their physical world, really, you
Oh,
know.
yeah.
And then mentally, she was the one that could see there was a false belief. She was the one that could sense something was off, right? It was
Yeah.
an idea, which is very mental body. Right? She had all of those. And yeah, but yeah, think about the yin, she's going to be celebrated. The yang, no, not in a female
Mm-hmm.
form, in a
That's
masculine
exactly right.
form.
Those two sisters,
Right,
right? Very
right.
much embodied those opposites.
Yep, yes. And then that visionary, the experience. Here's the one that's funny about that show. So the one, she could hear everything, and everybody depended on her. If you watch the movie, the
Right.
grandma's like, what does she want? Like they worship her hearing, but Bruno's vision, no, no.
Yeah, he was cast out.
Cast out. It's just another sense, but one we can't hold on to. And I think that's true too. People that are experiential are probably more valued than these visionaries, especially, oh man, you put a woman in a visionary role? No, right?
Hmm.
That's where I sat for a long time, like just
Right.
pretend like that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And even still, if I describe things that and that's the whole thing. See how those are two on the same spectrum too. So like visionary and experiential, that's why it was hard for me to just because it wasn't just visionary, it was also experiential. I was
Hmm.
experiencing, but am I seeing? I don't know, blah, blah, blah. So you just dismiss it, right? You just dismiss it.
Yeah.
But that's really good, really, really good way of looking at those parts, those pieces of us. And yeah, when they all came together, and that's the thing. So that emotional body, that they're gonna just, when Bruno comes back in and they're gonna say, Bruno, you are the best we got at a mental and spiritual person. We become whole when you play your part the best, right?
Hmm.
When when they allowed the heart to come into their home, it changed everything. They were more connected with the people in the village, because they were able to reflect and then receive, to give and receive, not just give. They became
Well, and
more,
I love they all work together. Like they
yeah,
all had to have each other. I love
yeah,
that part.
right. And I think we can look at that and we can say that's the goal to have within ourselves, right? To have that within ourselves. We don't just want to be a piece. We don't just want to be, because I mean, think about like the flower girl. We got to really know her name.
Is it
Lila?
Louisa? No, it's not
Luis
Louisa.
is the other one. I can't remember. But think about her. She had this amazing gift, but she wasn't, it wasn't authentic to her. She was
She didn't
presenting,
feel at peace.
no,
She was definitely
she was going to
um
marry that man for the family.
Giulietta. Is it Giulietta?
Is that right? I think
Oh,
Julieta's the
Isabella. Isabella.
Isabella. Yep.
Isabella.
Yeah,
So Isabella was like revered for her
yeah, oh
beauty and
yeah.
her,
She was the one they were
but
gonna,
when they,
yeah, they were gonna, she was the first generation of the second family to be married off and to expand, she was gonna take the family forward. And so she was gonna marry this man to to feed the family, to
yeah,
nourish the family, I should say, to let it go on and grow. And but she didn't want to. She didn't even want to marry him, but she was going to. And then there was that moment where it's so powerful, because she creates that cactus, right? She creates this thing that is
mhm,
prickly, and it's not the flower she was
typical
creating
beautiful
before.
or whatever. Yeah.
Right, typical beautiful. And she looks at it with wonder and realizes she sees her own divinity, right, for the first time. Even though she had
Yeah.
this amazing power, it was in that she was like, there I am. And that's really a lot of how it goes for all of us when we see our opposite. When we see where we're hiding in this corner, and then we all of a sudden see the other corner, it can be really enlightening, you know. But we're scared of that in a lot of places. We're told to don't look over there,
Like
don't look at
Abuela
the
was
opposite.
teaching them to not, to
Right.
avoid that. She was kind of that barrier in a
Yeah.
physical way.
Yeah. And also to just, kind of finish up the story of that movie. That movie is the story of dysfunctional families. So in dysfunctional families, we have a scapegoat, which is Mary Bell. We have um, we have a and also Bruno, but we have the golden child, which was that Isabel and Louisa. They're the golden children. Although Louisa, no, I think we have, what are they? But that Louisa was more, they're the
He
ones
was
that
the
have
one
to
that got
do all
everything
of it.
done.
Yeah,
Hmm. The
she was the
service.
worker person. Yeah.
Hmm.
And then there's the unseen child, that's Bruno, really is the unseen child. And so the family, here we are, here this family was like so grand, and they had the most beautiful house, but there were cracks. It was a dysfunctional family. And Mary Bell was strong enough, she was heart-centered enough to see it and not feel responsible for it, not feel like, it was as far as like, it was like, oh, we got to fix this. It wasn't like she didn't have a trauma response because she was so
Hmm.
heart-centered. She didn't have a trauma response. She's like, here's this stressor. And she was able to ask for help. She was able to get, all of those things, reach out to someone. She was able to call for help. She was able to strengthen herself, become, do that hard thing. I mean, every time I see those things. I'm like, good thing how is this going to ever be done in live action when she has to climb all the way up those stairs to go to the cave of, of
Mhm.
Bruno, like she becomes a bigger, stronger version of herself. And, you know, and um and how powerful that is being that heart-centered. Because when she goes to Louisa, that's the first person she goes to, because she sees Louisa's hurting, right? She
Oh.
sees Louisa is hurting. Louisa's having a trauma response because she wasn't able to be this perfect person that she had been.
Mhm.
She faltered, and that little twitch of her eye is a perfect representation of a trauma response, because when Maribel asks her, "Are you okay?" She does the twitch again, like she's having a trauma response. And because
Yeah.
because because Maribel stays heart-centered and asks her about it and is with her, then she can open up and say, "I have to do all this stuff and it's hard."
Mhm.
And that witness to it, all of us witnessed it. And if you watch the movie again at the end, when the whole sequence of song is she's showing all the pressure she's under. And at the end of that song, you just can't help but like take a deep breath, like she got it out. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
there was a release, and nothing changed. She still picked up all the donkeys and and moved to the church, but there was a release because it was witnessed. And that's what I mean, where I feel like
Oh.
someone else needs to be there. Once we've moved into trauma, we need that witness. We need a healer. And it's not
Yeah.
because we can't do it ourselves. We're not meant to, because we are this connected being, because that divine part of us knows we're connected to other people. And so when I
Mm.
heal, I'm healing the person I'm connected to as well, which is everybody,
Um,
right? Which is everybody, which is why this is it's a healing, eternal healing wheel. This is a practice we're
yeah.
going to do for the rest of our lives. The other day I was going to call you or talk to you, but like I woke up in the morning and I thought of like a tagline, and it's not perfected, but like a tagline for the Wholeness Network is happy takes practice.
Oh.
Because if you were to ask somebody, what do you want in life? If everybody would say to be happy, right? To be happy, that's
Yeah.
always the answer. But guess what? Happy takes practice, and that's what the library is for. It's the practice.
Mm.
It's a place for the practice to happen. Because if we can get over the fact that we're going to get to this place of happiness and never have unhappy again, that just doesn't exist. We really want that to be true. But why? I think why is because we have put the spiritual part of us, this expansive part, into a box. So once we expand and grow that spiritual part of us, then we can start to see how we have access to so many things, how it can be expansive and not just, one way or the other. It's
Mhm.
just, so it's like we're very
I love that.
physical, and we don't like the physical body. We judge it. We try and, we try and
Change
force
it.
change it. Yeah, we
Mhm.
try and force change. And then the spiritual body, we make it almost so unattainable. We make it so big, or we make it a list of to-dos. Neither of those bodies are fed or given what they need with those kinds of reactions, those kinds of actions toward them, those kind of
Yeah.
thoughts and beliefs, those kinds of emotions and thoughts about them, right?
I was just thinking we try to give our spiritual body form. We want to
Mhm.
have it form. We want to have the edges. And like you said, there's not,
There's not,
which is uncomfortable because all we
right?
know are edges.
Right. That's the plane we're living on, you
Yeah.
know? So, so yeah, if you spend a few minutes just expanding, um, thinking differently, here's what I'm thinking. What would the opposite be? And just expand that way. It's really enlightening. It feels really good. It's and that's the thing, is that experience. Let's say someone's trying something that to one person feels wrong, then they're just going to shut that off. But those two people can be having different experiences about the same thing. That's allowed in an expansive
Hmm.
place, right?
Yeah.
But we want to bring it down to the same. We got to all be the same, which is just not, that just cuts off that spiritual part of us. It just does.
Yeah. As you were saying that, I was just thinking about, when I bump up against people who have different
Mhm.
beliefs slash life experiences or whatever,
Yeah.
it gives me that opportunity to think about what would that be like. Like when I was having a conversation with my boss the other day, and we definitely have different beliefs on certain things, but we
Mhm.
allowed each other the space to have each other's own
Mhm.
beliefs about it. And we could talk about it and challenge each other a little bit, but
Mhm.
it was really beautiful to not fight,
Mhm.
just still be able to, and I felt like both of us expanded in that opportunity. It was
Mhm.
little,
Mhm.
but I've been reflecting on it a lot. Like in times past, it would be like, well, no, you have to be here with me. This person's here. I'm like, well, I guess you're wrong, you know, instead of saying like, nope, we're actually like, oh,
Mhm.
I don't know.
Right. And in that moment, both of you did something magical. You held on to yourselves. That's the thing. Where before we feel like we got to convince the other person.
Yes.
But the magic happens when I hold on to myself and and then I allow them to hold on to themselves, right? I expect them to hold on to themselves. I don't expect them to, because that's another thing. When we're in a conversation and it's like you can tell the other person wants you to make them feel better or like justify them, in a way.
Yes.
And it's like, well, I can't hold on to myself if I'm also making sure you're okay, right?
Mhm.
And so that's the practice. But when I hold on to myself, actually, when I'm in that, especially that big S self, right? When I'm holding on to my big S self, the other person I'm with, they come into congruence with that. It actually serves them. It's not selfish. It's not selfish. I'm not just it's different than just like I'm drawing the line and this is where I stand. That's not the same thing that you had. It was the opposite of that,
Yeah.
actually.
Right.
And yet they were opposite, you were both holding on to yourselves, and so
Yeah.
that finding of that self is super important, which, that's the U print. That was the goal of that U print. And the goal of this podcast is, to really just describe that part of the spiritual body, that spiritual body within us, because it is elusive to so many people and it's been hurt. It's been,
Mhm.
well, we feel like it's been, because it doesn't have the kind of form, so for instance, some people have spiritual trauma over sexual abuse. That we can put
Okay.
words behind, right? That we can,
Mhm.
because it deals with the physical body, it deals with
Okay.
that physical body. But if we've had a spiritual wound that is, let's say I have a relationship with a divine being that of course is going to be reflective of my physical experience with a authority figure, right? Those are going to get
Mhm.
very construed because they live on the same, they're on the same spectrum. If I've had an experience with a person, an authority figure, or especially a parental figure, how can that not affect my relationship with a divine being, let alone my own divine being, me, that divine
Right.
part of me? So there's that. You could say that's a trauma that has happened, and it didn't happen in one moment. It wasn't something that happened in one moment, but it causes, for some people, that's going to cause a physical reaction, um, an activation when certain things are discussed. And to try and talk to that person out of it it doesn't work. We don't need to talk someone out of an activation. If we sit and listen, tell me more about that. Recognizing I got to hold on to myself because I'm not there to fix it. I'm not there to fix it. I'm there to
Mm.
witness it. I'm there to witness. And so I recognize my own activation. And if I feel activation in my body, then I can reach out and say, "Oh, that's really hard for me to hear. Like that's hitting me." Right?
Mhm.
And that doesn't mean the other person stops. We're just recognizing our own experience and then, yeah, okay, let me breathe for a minute, or hey, can I have a little bit of a break? because I'm activated, like I need a break or something like that. But that's very different than expecting the other person to change who they are and stop doing what they're doing so that I don't get activated.
Okay.
Just see how there's it's kind of like both at the same time. It's like holding on to ourselves and reaching out when we need help. Recognizing that activation. We all will have activations. We all will have activation for different things. And what activates me, I know other people would be like, I don't even see what the problem, like there's nothing there. Like there's nothing there. And you're like, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
And that was a long journey because I felt like part of the healing was having my hurt justified so that other people understood. Like that's what I thought you had to do. Other people have to agree and then it's real.
Okay.
But that but owning my own activation, feeling it in my body and saying, no, my body, there's a saying, the body doesn't lie. The body never lies. It's not going to activate over just anything, over nothing. The body will always tell you what's happening in the mental, emotional, and spiritual bodies. Always. It cannot lie. This is why muscle testing works for people. That's why that's a whole thing. Because
It's the barometer.
it's a barometer. That physical body is our communicator.
Yeah.
And we can't just invoke trauma. It just doesn't. Or attraction. Or, these things that happen. Just they're reactive, they're innate emotions. I loved in the emotional body on that paper, one of the element for emotional body is water. And I thought, why is it water? And I thought, because you know what? I cry when I'm angry, when I'm happy, when I'm sad or grieving, when I'm fearful, like all the emotions are able to express with water, with tears. Isn't that fascinating?
Uh-huh.
So
I love that.
you express
Well,
in tears. Mhm.
I guess maybe this will be the last part, but if I am experiencing spiritual trauma, is that a time for me to have a ritual that I could
Mm,
put into place so that I feel like that spiritual body doesn't have to shut off
yeah,
or
I
can
love that.
expand?
Hmm. I think give yourself permission if you're having spiritual trauma. First of all, maybe write yourself a letter that says, I believe you. I
Mm,
believe you that you've been hurt. And we don't have to name it. We don't have to give it parameters. We don't have to figure out what the problem is,
okay.
when it's in that spiritual trauma. We don't have to be able to describe it to someone else other than a sensation. Really just get clear with the sensation, the activation, because then that's all we have to say. I'm activated, or people might use the word triggered, whatever you want to word. And we don't have to. And when people say why, just say, because my body is feeling this way. Just
Okay.
describe the activation, rather than the scenario, because the truth is in traumatic events, the part of our brain that's meant to describe the time, the that part of our brain, it actually shuts down. So it doesn't have a timeline. In fact, that's the definition of trauma, is when we have something, an experience, it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Trauma does not have an end.
It's like
It has a
expansive, like this room.
right. Yeah.
Oh,
It's like the opposite of the spiritual body, right? It's like the antithesis of
it's like the
joy.
black hole, right?
Right. Yeah. So when and that's the thing, like it's not good news, but the fact is, if it is on that, um, if it is the opposite, then the direction of pain we've gone into, we all have the opportunity, we have the the expansion of that joy side as well. And so that's another thing. So yes, write yourself a letter, just tell yourself, I have spiritual trauma, or I have experienced spiritual trauma, or what I feel about this is real. And you don't even have to put a name to it. What I feel as I sit on the pews is real, if that's where it
Mhm.
activates, right? then I think you're right. Create, like, let's say, what do I want to do? Because what we're trying to do is we want to move into the joy side of that spectrum, right? We've been on the trauma. So what kind of things can I do that bring me the joy? And then create a ritual out of that. You know,
Okay.
if it's sitting in the bathtub, you know, and we're talking, you've got to know the sensations, right? And that could be a middle step, is sometimes our bodies are so shut down, because we can't handle the trauma, the activation, we're not feeling the joy either. So there's some healing to do, peeling back some of those layers, and that if we've been activated for so long, it's gonna feel uncomfortable in our body for a time. Um, and that requires a lot of support and a lot of compassion, and maybe some time, you know, but the practice of the ritual, where we move into these places where I feel peaceful, or maybe we just start out off peaceful, maybe we're not ready for joy yet, but something that makes me feel peaceful. If sitting outside in the, you know, in the sun makes me feel peaceful, do that every day with intention. If that making, if you know, if that creating a cup of tea is your spiritual practice, you know, because it just feeds your soul, you know, do that every day. And as you stir, you know, your whatever honey in, or whatever you're adding to it, um, you know, look at the design it makes, you know, see how it changes from day to day, and feel how it feels in your body as you drink it, you know, how it changes from too hot maybe to where at the end it's not quite hot enough, and just feel every single part of it. Use the physical body to invoke that spiritual body, you know, use those positive things so that the body can be comfortable in those places of peace and joy. Because that's the truth, is when there's trauma, it's difficult, because even we feel activated in the joy, and it can be activating in both places. And it's really difficult. So, but if you can find your own little ritual on your own that is safe, um, then that begins the practice. That's the spirit, you know, that's the thing. There's religious practices, and then there's these spiritual practices that just let that spiritual body teach you, because it's all knowing. You know, it's, people say maybe that's part of your higher self, you know, maybe it is your higher self. I don't know. I just know that there's this part of who I am that is not able to be defined. Anyway,
Yeah.
so I hope that was helpful to kind of talk a little bit about the spiritual body and what it is and how it feels and how it's connected to the other bodies. What, you know, it's just funny to me, because it is hard to describe, but yet so beautiful and so part of our being. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's part of who we are. We've put it in a box for so long. I mean, we could say that about the physical body. We've put the physical body in a box. It's got to look this way. It's got to be this way. It's
Yeah.
got to be this color. It's got to be this gender. You know, it's got to be this
Right.
sexual orientation. Like, we have it in a box, and it's not serving us anymore. These systems, these parameters are falling. They're
Mm.
collapsing, because they are not eternal. They are and they're beautiful, because they're the physical things. They're temporal, you know, because they're part of this temporal,
Yeah.
spiritual, physical, temporary world. They are going to change. It's supposed to.
Yeah.
They are
Yeah.
going to grow. They are going to take in more information, and transform. And that's the way they're supposed to be. We shouldn't resist it.
And we could go down a rabbit hole, so I won't, but just when you're saying that, like, it goes along with the mental and emotional too. I mean,
Exactly.
those are gonna
Hmm.
find ways to expand and contract and
Right.
change and like defy those systems that we've set up
Yep.
or have
Exactly.
set up for us.
Right. Well, and you know, another, to go expand that rabbit hole, if you look at that line, you know, so we might have all our thoughts and beliefs, and we might shift our thoughts and beliefs, or shift our emotions. Maybe we're depressed, and we heal from depression and become more able to be at peace in the time, maybe those are changing, but we can even, if you expand beyond that, then that's when you get the psychic abilities, or that's when you get the empath abilities, right? You moved beyond even the physical, you've expanded and used the physical and spiritual realms to expand that even out, right? To expand your experience emotionally and mentally. So,
Wow. That's cool.
yeah.
Might blow my mind a little bit. I like it.
Listen to it twice. Listen to the podcast twice.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it does, like, it goes over our heads. Like, I am the same way. It's like, what? And I listen to it again. I'm like, oh, now I get it. Oh, right. You see it from a different angle. But that's the spiritual body at work. Seeing it from a different angle. It's expanding the idea of it. Right?
Okay.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's expanding. So, the thought might be the mental body, but the expansion and all the possibilities are the spiritual body in connection with it. Do you see how they work together?
Yeah.
Someday I'll even, I learn too. Like, as I'm even talking, I don't know if I've said the words this way before. I'm learning too, right? They always teach me these 4 bodies. Feel empowered every day with wholeness videos, meditations, downloads, classes, and more by joining the Wholeness Library at thewholenessnetwork.com.